Hey everybody. Today Matthew Ragan joins me for a beer here at the Lumen Labs. We talk all about his life and career in the world of projection mapping. He's a touch designer wizard who started out doing live performance at Keene State back in the early 2000s. Then during his master's program at Arizona State, he hosted a popular touch designer tutorial vlog. Working closely with derivative software, he developed a host of teaching materials geared at educating a new generation of users in advanced techniques. His vlog and expertise ended up catching the attention of the guys over at Obscura Digital, who scooped him up right out of school. He's worked with them for the past few years, recently taking on the role of their lead software developer. Anybody who's paying attention to the world of projection mapping knows how important Obscura is to the scene and how they've raised the bar for new media installations in places all around the world. Matt takes us through his time working there, and we talk about how the makers of a tool help to define the art that gets made, and how that cycle defines our industry. It's a great episode with a legend in the scene. I think you'll like it. So I guess we'll start with how do we meet each other? Did we meet each other through Joe T?
I feel like we met each other. My most concrete memory is when we were both at the airport at LDI.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's
and we
exactly
were
how
like,
that
get
happened.
the fuck out.
Yeah,
we were like both flying back to Oakland, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny too because I remember during that LDI, that's when you and Joe T were you guys were doing touch designer projects, or you were like teaching her how to use touch designer, and she was like, "Oh yeah, Matt Ragan, I've been taking lessons from him." And I'm like, "Oh, that's the guy from Obscura." She's like, "Yeah, totally." And she's like, "I think he's going to be at LDI." I'm like, "Really?" And then I distinctly remember at LDI, I like saw you, and I was just like, I bet you that's the guy from Obscura.
Oh, that's
because you were all in black and
of
you were
course.
I'm like,
I was like in my uniform.
That's definitely the guy from Obscura. Actually, no. The year before that, at LDI, you were there too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I met you and Zoe on the floor.
Right. That's right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because that was the year. So that year we taught a workshop that was like 2 days long, and then I think that was the year that Disguise was doing their robot demo.
Yeah.
And then it like didn't work. I think it worked finally on like the last day of the show.
So I actually never saw it.
I didn't see it either.
No.
Every time I went by, they're like, it's not working right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I was like, oh, that's like the worst. That's my deepest fear for a demo is it's just like not working and there are people waiting to see it.
Well, funny story. I don't know if you'd been to LDI in years previous, but the way that D3, right? It's so hard for me to call them Disguise. I'm like, yeah, it's fucking D3. But the way that they broke into LDI was they, instead of doing like a booth on the floor, they rented that penthouse suite, and they would just go, they would all fan out on the floor, and they would hand out cards to only people that they thought were like quote unquote cool enough to be, to bring to their penthouse suite. And they just circumvented the whole conference thing, man. They circumvented the fees and like all that shit and like the drama of the floor, and they were able to hand pick just the right people to come to their booth, which was the penthouse suite at the Hard Rock.
Right.
And I remember when I saw that, I was just like, man, these guys are badasses. Because that is
clever.
That is the perfect way to do it. They got in big trouble. They were like, the conference was like, no, you guys, what the fuck are you doing?
Hey, stop it.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
They're like, well, we happened to rent we happened to rent a suite at the Hard Rock during the conference. We bought our floor passes.
Fine. Come on. That's hilarious.
That's an interesting company, man. It's they came out of UVA, United Visual Artists.
Yep.
You know those guys like Chris Bird?
Yeah, because they're. I took one of their trainings, and I'm gonna mess up their history. So nobody quote me about the history of their development.
We're all gonna quote you.
No, what have I done? But it was like, I think they used to be called something like Dragonfly. No, Mosquito.
What was called Mosquito?
So Disguise, if you rewind, was something. I think it was Mosquito, and then it became Dragonfly, and then it became Dragonfly 3, and then it became D3, and then it rebranded as Disguise.
That's funny, man, because I didn't know that. I only knew it as D3. But Chris and the other guy, I can't remember his name, but the other partner, right?
Ash?
Yeah. When I used to work at Excel Video.
Okay.
In LA, and I remember I was like the media server tech there, right? And when I was working there, and they came in to do a tech demo for the D3 server. And I don't remember at that point if it was called D3 or Dragonfly or what, but they came in, and I remember them showing off their system to my bosses, and my bosses just laughed. They were like, "Guys, this is a nifty toy you've built, guys, but no one's ever gonna buy this."
Oh, famous last words.
Dude, it's Excel. Shortly after they kind of like hemorrhaged, they lost their lead sales guy, and the company just like split apart and exploded, and it was a fracture over ego. John Weissman was the guy's name, and he was one of those big personality, very cool, but he definitely like owned that shit. And he was responsible for all the sales at Excel, all the tours and everything. He got in some kind of argument with the owners of the company, and he was just like, "Fine, fuck you guys, I'm gonna go make my own company." And he just split off, made his company called Chaos Visuals or something, and everybody, like literally half the staff and all of the business followed him out the door. And
oh my god.
Well, I mean, it was a lesson on how things worked for me. I was just like, wow, this is really all about personalities.
People. It's all about people.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. It's like, great, Excel Video, it's a big name. It's like, no, it's really about this one guy who formed relationships with all of their clients and all their employees.
That's like, I feel like one of the best lessons I ever heard from a designer, another designer friend, instructor, I guess, was I was like taking this class that was all about collaborative styles and how you work together in design teams.
Yeah.
And Connie used to say, play nice in the sandbox. Like the number one rule you can have as a designer is to learn how to play nice in the sandbox.
Yeah. Well, it's too small a world not to, man.
Yeah.
Like if you piss off somebody, or if you botch a gig, or if you... Botching a gig happens to everybody, right? But if you act like a shithead...
Oh, it's like...
It's over.
Just make it worse.
Yeah. Well, it's no one... In the end, you want to work with people who are cool.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like the bar, I find... For us, it's like I would rather... work with somebody who has a lower skill level but is much more fluid in their interactions and their like, you know what I mean? Like I want to work with people who are cool is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Someone that you want to hang out with. Yeah. Not someone you're like, oh god,
fuck, it's this guy.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like a small industry thing.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah. I don't know if that's universally true, but in all of the companies that I've worked for and in all of the groups that I've worked with, that's how it's been.
Yeah. I think that definitely from the Obscura days, I think that's true.
Listen to you, the Obscura days.
The Obscura days, back in the olden days.
Back in the days.
Oh my god, it's hilarious to me to think about that, because it's like a year and a half since the acquisition. But like it reminds me that when I was first doing this work, we threw all kinds of shit at my advisor, because his approach for how to do projection mapping was you'd open up Photoshop, and from Photoshop you would full screen your application, you'd map it out. So you'd full screen Photoshop, you'd open it up, you'd make a rough map, then you'd pull that back into Premiere, After Effects, whatever you're doing your editing in. Yeah. You did the distortion there, and then you'd output your files.
Yeah.
And we used to be like, oh, that's the old way of doing it. I was like, okay, by the old way, do you mean like the way that we've done it for like 3 years?
The old way.
The old way. Oh, well, the old way of doing this is to map it with Photoshop, but now we use geometry. Okay.
Man, it's so funny because I definitely came into projection mapping maybe one generation after that, right? But there's a lot of people that like Velo Verkhaus, right, was telling me about mapping back in the day when he was doing it. And it was all about Photoshop, After Effects, and doing like distortion warps within Photoshop.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it's like, wow, man.
We used to build these like crazy ass comps where you'd bake all of your distortion into one layer of your After Effects composition. So then you could work only in flat art in Photoshop and then do a pass of it through After Effects. So it would automate all of the distortion for you.
Yeah.
So you'd have like these like comps to try and handle all the masking, all of the distortion, and then all of the other weird shit that would happen.
I love nested comps.
Oh my god! And then someone would move something on a set, and you'd be like, "Fuck! Why? Why did you do that?"
Yeah, man, that's funny. It's it makes you wonder, right? It makes you wonder, and I guess this is true of any art form, but the tool defines the art in that it defines the possibilities. It defines the boundaries of what your art form can be. And then the artist defines the innards of that. So it's this collaboration, right, between a tool maker and the artist. And I think that in your case, you developed your own tool, more or less. I mean, I know Obscura was doing it before you got there.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But you came in and you definitely took that and ran with it, and then that basically you became the artist and the tool maker, which is really, it defines, that's how you really have control over your art form.
That's a weird place because you very quickly get in this like messy place where you're like, do I spend my time making tools or do I spend my time making art? Do I spend time only to make the tool well enough for what I need to do? Do I plan ahead for like how I want to use this in the future? And it can be really easy to lose yourself in only the tool making or only the art making.
I was just gonna say I definitely know people who, it's like they're the tool makers and their art is the making of the tool, which is
perfectly crafted
tool. Yeah. Which is cool. But I find a lot of that's the danger with like your Touch Designer or Max MSP, those types of environments, right, where it's like the majority of the really proficient people that I know in those platforms are tool makers, right? They're master tool makers, and it's rare to find people like yourself who have managed to be proficient at making those tools and being in that environment and are making compelling art and beautiful things with those tools.
Yeah, it's that foot in both worlds, right?
Yeah, it's very common to see people who make amazing tools, amazing like crazy complex comps, but the stuff that comes out of it's like, yeah, that's cool, but it's not really visually compelling, or it's not attractive to me, like.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Rad. That's rad.
Yeah.
See where you're going there. It's a weird space, and I think that's like. These days, the landscape is weirder all the time. Like, I look at the explosions in Unity, Unreal, and Notch, and you name it, Touch, Open Frameworks, Cinder. Like, there is this ever-expanding landscape of platforms, libraries, and approaches. And it's how... Like, if I think now about, like, if I was to jump into this field today, how do you get your bearings? Where do you plant a flag, and where do you decide that you're going to start exploring and dig in?
Yeah.
Because there's 1,000 things to choose from.
Well, you just got to choose one. I think there's, I think a lot of people choose their tool based on what they went to school for. Right. Mm-hmm. And then they take that. I don't know how you got into Touch, but like for me, I got trained in After Effects. I grew up using Photoshop, and then I took those, and then I got really into VJing. So then my focus turned to like the VJ real-time playback apps. At that point, it was like, what was it? it was the OG Resolume.
Modulate?
I don't know. Modulate happened after.
Oh my god.
But there was Resolume back in the day. Before Resolume became like a polished thing, it was this other thing, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it was, and then that led me into media servers and blah, blah, blah. But it's, those tools defined how I thought about art and how I thought about, the art that I was making.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's... I don't know. I've got big grumbles. I feel like a grouchy old man sometimes.
How so?
Well, because... So one of the pieces that's been interesting for me about my journey with touch is that it's opened up ways for me to understand what's Python, what's object-oriented programming, what's writing the shader language, how do you write a fragment shader, how do you write a vertex shader. So it's been this incremental unveiling of the pieces that make up that environment, and it's felt like at every step of the way I've gotten to peek like a little bit further behind the curtain and understand why is this filter in Photoshop called add? Why is this called multiply? What's the underlying mathematics that's manipulating and driving that? Why is this thing fast and this thing slow?
Yeah.
And I feel like the danger sometimes that we encounter with turnkey tools is that there's just a checkbox or a drop-down menu, and you don't really understand, or you're not invited to really interrogate what's going on underneath that.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of Touch Designer, is that it allows you to play with like beautiful math.
Right. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the whole point, and that's the draw. So you can really like dive down in, and you can get like really down deep, and you can do whatever the fuck you want. Which is honestly a huge problem for, I think, a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, yeah, do whatever you want. It's like, well.
Oh my god, I remember when I started, there was like, Touch has plenty of guardrails. It has more guardrails now than it used to, but...
It's just more popular.
Yeah, right, exactly. You need to make sure that you don't crash because you ran out of memory, because you're allowed to do whatever you want. And there were so many times when I'm just like, why am I crashing this? Oh, right, I'm out of VRAM. I've just like spilled into page, and then I just died. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I get it. Fine. And it really revealed to me the precarity of writing an application, is that like, it's the world's dangerous out there. You're allowed to crash your computer, fine. Go ahead, do whatever you want. Be reckless.
This is a dangerous world.
Oh man.
Man.
All right, you silly little contraption.
So how did this? So you went to school at first was it in New Hampshire?
No, I was. I did. I started back in the old days. I went to a junior college in Lompoc, which is my hometown, and then Santa Maria.
And that's what? That's SoCal?
Yeah, Central Coast. It's like about an hour north of Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And so I was there. I did a... what do they call that? The transfer studies, I think, is the official name for it, which was essentially in the junior college system. It was like all of your first and second year undergraduate requirements. Mm-hmm. So I did all that. I thought I was going to be an English teacher for a stretch, and then I thought I was going to be a graphic designer.
You were way off.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to teach English. No, I want to be a graphic designer. I had been an actor in high school, and I was like... At some point, I just like hit a wall and was like, whatever, fuck it. I'm going to go and I'm going to get a degree in acting. Mm-hmm. So then I went to Fresno State for my bachelor's degree, and I was focused entirely on performance. So I was an actor and a dancer.
Interesting.
And so it was after I graduated there where I had this moment where I was like, what am I going to do with myself? Fuck.
Yeah.
I was planning on auditioning for grad programs, like theater-based MFA programs, and then professional training programs, and I got a car accident.
You got in a car accident?
Yeah, I was stopped at a light. I was like actually headed to a show that I was performing in, and my joke at the time was that I got shot with a Jeep Cherokee. Because it was, on a straightaway in Fresno where the speed limit's like 50 miles an hour.
Dude.
And this Jeep Cherokee rear-ended me.
Oh my God.
I hit another car, that car, another car. I spun across 3 lanes. This like little Honda Civic that I was driving like exploded all over the fucking road.
Oh my God.
Luckily, I was totally fine, except freaked the fuck out.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like, I was like, I still remember, like, I got in the car accident, and my first 3 phone calls, the first person I called was my stage manager. And I was like, hey, I'm very sorry to call you, but I'm not going to be at the show this evening.
Wow.
And then I called my mother, and I was like, hey, check it out. I'm okay, but this thing just happened.
You have to preface any conversation like that with your mom.
Right.
Hey, I'm okay.
Hey, I'm okay, but there was this small incident. And then I called the person I was seeing at the time, and I was like, could you maybe come pick me up?
Yeah.
Because, like, my car has exploded on the road. And I just totally had it together. Everything was totally all right. I was very serious and focused.
Yeah.
Like, got the car towed and, like, left. And it was, like, at that moment where it all hit me. And I just totally fell apart. It was just like, oh my fucking God, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Being in a car crash is, it's like instant adrenaline, and then that fades, and then you're a mess.
Right, then you're like, okay, I'm alive.
Yeah. I've been in one car accident, and it was like a similar experience where I just got like slammed from the back, and I looked behind me, and the dude's car was like destroyed. I was in like a Subaru Outback station wagon. One of those like old green,
yeah,
like the 1998 edition. And I was just like, fuck, man. And I like got out, went back, and like my car was fine. And there was a cop trailing us. So it was just like, I was like, man, that really sucks. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's wild.
The car was fucked. Yeah. Oh. And you're gonna have to pay for mine.
Sorry.
Yeah. So that happened.
That happened, and then I had this moment where I was like, what am I gonna do? So I missed one show, but I was in a show that was opening in like 2 months, 3 months, next semester, whenever that was. And that happened to line up with a bunch of other auditions. So because of the show schedule I was in, I was going to miss a bunch of other opportunities. I was like, what do I do? And I ended up having an interview with a educational outreach program called Upward Bound in New Hampshire. And they serve first-generation, low-income potential college students. And I'd worked for them one summer, and I was like, when am I going to have an opportunity to move across the country to try out a job and see what that's like?
To fucking New Hampshire.
That's right. So I went to New Hampshire, Keene, New Hampshire.
You know that's where I'm from.
Get out.
Swear to God, man. Wow. Not Keene. Dover.
Oh, did you go to Las Vegas?
No, just Dover. And then Portsmouth. Portsmouth was like a regular frequent stop.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's funny though. I read that on your bio. I was just like, oh man.
That's wild. So I lived in Keene. I worked with young people 13 to 18 who were usually the first in their family to go to college.
Yep.
Or came from families of low socioeconomic status, and coached them through the process of applying to college, getting to college. I was part of a team that ran a residential educational outreach program. So for 6 weeks every summer, we had somewhere between 70 and 100 13 to 18-year-olds that would live in the dorms with us for 6 weeks, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And we ran all of their programming and enrichment classes.
So you were working for them. You worked for that college. You weren't going there. You worked for them.
I worked for them, yeah.
And at that point, was that that was not new media at all, was it?
No, it was like nowhere close to new media. It was all educational and outreach counseling support.
Oh, interesting.
So what was interesting, like turning points for me there was, I was a young person. It was like 2006. I was like familiar with this thing that was the internet. Google was like slowly...
The internet.
Google was like slowly releasing Google Docs and spreadsheets and Google Sites.
Yeah.
Facebook was just barely a thing that had opened past colleges and universities. And I was just like flabbergasted that all of our materials, outreach, internal coordination all happened on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you're kidding me. Like, this is absurd. So I spearheaded a big charge to move us towards using online documents, using wikis, leveraging free or readily accessible tools on the web to make sure that we could reach our students and then streamline some of how we worked.
Kicking and screaming into the digital.
Yeah, come on,
age.
get over here. And then from there, I transitioned over to a program called the Center for Engagement Learning and Teaching,
Mm-hmm.
which was, instead of working with students, I worked with faculty. So I trained faculty on how to use new technology and web technology. And it was at that point that I really transitioned into doing, videography, photography, more digital manipulation. And it was like in this moment in life that I was like, what do I want to do? I was going to a circus school in Brattleboro at the time.
I didn't realize you were part of the performance arts scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cool.
I'd done a few productions with Keen. I'd managed to sneak into their auditions and had a few parts that I did there. I worked with Palobolis through the dance program that was housed at Keene State. So I was still performing and acting and then doing circus training and then a circus gig here and there. And I was like, it was like a time in the world when there was before the Affordable Care Act. So I was an hourly employee with no benefits.
Yeah, that was way before the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
It was I remember when I got insurance for the first time, I was just like, wow. Healthcare.
Icahn has doctor?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so I was just, I was trying to figure out I don't want to gig for the rest of my life. And I don't want to do a master's program that's going to leave me asking more of the same questions.
Did you know you were going to go for your master's?
I knew I wanted to do a master's program. I wanted to go back to school and push harder and learn some new things. But I didn't really know what that was. And I felt totally lost. Mm-hmm. And then it was the ISAM tour.
Yeah. Fellow Vercast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember following it online and was like, this is it. This is what I want to fucking do.
Wow, man. So that was the moment that got you into...
Yeah, I was like, all right, projection mapping and real-time video. I want to do this.
Yeah.
All right, this is what I have to do.
You have made your career in a very short amount of time, I have to say, man. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's going fast. It's been weird.
Because I remember I was here. I was living in the Bay Area when that all happened. And I had known Velo for a long time before that. That was I worked for Velo back in the day. And then I moved here and then I heard about that. I'm just like, oh man, should have kept working for Velo.
If only.
Yeah.
So I found a program at Arizona State called Interdisciplinary Digital Media and Performance.
Okay, so you saw that, you were like, change direction, going this way.
Yeah, I was like, all right, here we go.
Yep.
90-degree hard J-turn.
Yep.
Let's go.
That's the best transitions happen like that.
And I just doubled down. I was like, I know how to write formulas in Excel. I'd done all this data analysis, and I was like, I understand the principles of what coding probably looks like. I could, sure.
Yeah.
Processing was a thing that was everybody was starting to talk about. It's great. All right, let's go. Let's do it.
So how did you find touch?
Oh, you're gonna love this. So I guess it was my first year in my grad program, and I got a collaborator of mine, Dan Fine, scooped me up from a class that he and I were in together. He found me right away, and he was like, you want to collaborate on a show with me? I was like, yes, I do. I want to do anything and everything.
Yeah.
And so he pulled me into a show called Bacon. That was, man, I went from my wing floaties to the deep end of the pool with a weight belt in 2 seconds. It felt like, because that production had floor projection from 2 different overhead projectors bounced off of first surface mirrors, a channel of projection that drove a cyc on one side of the stage, and then we had 2 wraparound cycs because we did a thrust installation where the action happened on stage and the audience was seated around it.
Yep.
And the 2 wraparound cycs were 4 channels each. So we had like 9 channels of projection driven off of a combination of a Watch Out media server and then an Isadora media server.
Oh, fucking Watch Out.
I know. Watch Out, of all things. Holy shit. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't think I'd projection mapped anything in my life before that moment. And all of a sudden, man. I was like working on
first production.
Yeah, first production.
Jesus.
And I was like, oh god.
Yeah, but you know, in an arts program, right, in your master's, that's like, you know, it's very experimental.
Yeah.
It's just like, sure, let's do it.
Go, jump in with both feet. So I worked on that production with Dan, and then we were trying to figure out what we were going to do the next semester. And I was looking at, we'd been using Isadora for that show. And Izzy's super rad tool has changed a lot since back then.
Is it still going?
Yeah, it's still going.
Because I remember, probably 8 years ago, that's when Isadora entered my consciousness, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is neat. It's kind of like Max, but next level and more geared towards projection. And
it's totally focused on a lot of dance. It's used in a lot of dance productions and theatrical productions. And it uses a lot of scene conventions, so you don't have to... The same way you think about setting up a scene or an act is how you think about setting up your media. So it handles a lot of the transition pieces in a way that's sensible for how you think about plays and live action shows.
It's another example of a tool that helps to... it's a tool that's shaped by an art form.
Yep.
That shapes the art form.
Exactly. So it was rad, but I wanted some visuals that were a little more dynamic, responsive, faster performing. And so I decided I wanted to go hard into Quartz Composer, back when Quartz was still a thing that was supported.
Yeah, Quartz was great.
It was great.
Yeah.
Oh, those were the days.
Right.
And so we, Dan and I tracked down a faculty member who we wanted to be our advisor on an independent study. And we were like, okay, we want to do this thing. We're going to focus on Quartz. It's going to plug into this other framework. We're going to use it in this way. And this instructor was like, that's cool, but I hear this thing, Touch Designer, is actually the thing to learn. And I don't really care about Quartz. So if you change your mind, you come back and find me.
Wow.
And I was so fucking livid. I was like pissed. I was like, fine, fuck you. I will learn it by myself. And so then I was like, I doubled down, and like it was only Windows application at that point. So I had this lovely MacBook that I pulled a CD drive out of and added another hard drive, and then
dual
booted it.
Yeah.
And then got it up and running, and the only videos at the time were the Mutech videos from like 2007 or something.
Mutech videos?
Yeah, they were like old tutorial videos from workshops that happened at Mutech. And so in the background you hear this sweet bass line from a set that's rehearsing upstairs. And then I just like churned through those. I think I watched the same tutorials like 5 times or 6 times trying to understand how to do some simple little thing.
Tutorials are definitely... It's like you get indoctrinated into the culture of a program.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I used to do... I can't remember the website, but After Effects tutorials. I've spent so many hours just going through After Effects tutorials, and like, yeah, that's how you learn a program.
Video Copilot. Oh my god.
Yeah, Video Copilot. There you go.
Saved my life so many times. How do I make this comp work?
Right.
Oh, I need an explosion.
Yeah.
I need a crumbling wall. I need it. Damn.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how I found my way to Touch, was to spite a faculty member that I felt like had slighted me, but they were actually just saying like, Quartz is probably not the future. You should look at something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's smart. He was right. You know,
yeah. 100%.
And even now Touch is becoming. I feel like Touch is finally hitting the mainstream.
Yeah, they're a rocket ship. They're just like going nuts.
Yeah, well, that, and there's a lot of attention on it. I think in no small part because Obscura used it to such success in so many of their projects.
Well, I see it used by all sorts of different studios now, like places that you would never expect to see it pop up. You're like, oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Well, it's a useful tool. It's a very dynamic tool. You can do anything with it.
That right. There's that dangerous thing. Like you can do anything with it. So what do you do?
Yeah. I mean, make a lighting console, do projection mapping, anything in between.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Be wild.
Yeah. And the culture has hit critical mass. You know, that's what it was clear to me when I went to the Touch Designer Conference in Berlin, because it was last year.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, you know, this is like a thing.
What's crazy is like I remember the Facebook help group. God, I jumped in on the Facebook help group when Richard started it. More than a couple. I don't know, 6 years ago now?
Richard is the...
Richard... Oh my god, why can't I think of Richard's last name? Richard's another cat that does a ton of touch tutorials. He was out at Projection Artworks in London. He just recently moved out to Japan. And he's been in the scene for more than a minute.
Oh, wow.
But he started this touch group, I think, out of a meetup that happened in London. And it was like, 100 people, 120 people. And then pretty soon it was like 200, and then it was 500.
Yeah.
And I remember early on, like, I could push pretty hard at answering questions and being a part of the dialogue and contributing. And now it's like, I don't know, more than 5,000 people, 5,000 members. And it's just, you cannot get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
Because people are just there to fiercely contribute.
Yeah.
Like, damn. All right, get it.
It's funny to see like an online community grow like that. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I've watched the LEDs are awesome community kind of do that. It was like this tiny little nothing of a community, and now it's like thousands of people. It's just like, whoa.
It's crazy.
Who are all these people? This was like a Bay Area LED nerd scene, community online. Now it's just like...
You're like, whoa, okay, God.
Right.
All right, cool.
So you started doing Touch Designer at ASU, and you were doing like a bunch of stuff with performance arts, right? I read, what was Ars Robotica?
Oh my God, Ars Robotica. Jesus. What a crazy endeavor that was. So in the 3 years I was at, it's funny, it doesn't seem like that many projects now, and as a grad student, I was like, what am I doing? Because I think in the 3 years I was at ASU, I worked on something like 26 productions or installations. Mm-hmm. And that usually meant that our program was structured so that if you were working on a project, it usually meant that you were in some capacity working on the system, hardware, infrastructure design. You were involved in the UI, UX, how it's getting used, what's the experience of the piece, the media design, the installation, the execution, the operation. So it was like you were a team of one. If you were lucky, it might be a team of like three. Mm-hmm. And Ars Robotica was a research project that was co-sponsored between the School of Film, Dance, and Theater and the Center for... I forget their full acronym. But it was Science, Robotics, and Astronomy, I think.
Oh, wow, what a combo.
Yeah, a huge, like, pure engineering team.
Yeah.
And they had a robot called Baxter. And Baxter, as a product, is a robotic that runs on ROS, the Robot Operating System.
I had no idea that there was a robotic operating system.
Yep, there's an open source robot operating system. And Baxter is intended to be your kind of entry point for how do you think about robotics programming and interaction with humans. So it's got this like goofy screen interface that you can put images on or faces on. It's got a set of cameras and distance sensors on it. And then it has a few different modes for articulating arms.
What's the form factor? Can it like move around on its own? Or?
It's positional, so it's stabilized from like the waist down, but it's got articulating joints that are humanoid-ish, so a torso kind of shape, and then 1, 2, 3, 5. A 5 joint arm. Was that 5 or 6 joint arm?
Just 1.
2. So you've got like this robot that looks slightly humanoid-ish, but is gigantic. And the director that I was working with was really interested in how do we understand our relationship to robotics. What would it mean to have a robot in a performance, in a theatrical play? How do we interrogate this uncanny valley that we are fast approaching and don't really know how to handle?
Yeah.
So what we, on paper, when you've never done something, every idea seems so simple. You're like, oh yeah, how hard could it be? Yeah, we can do that.
Right.
So our idea was, we'll take a Kinect, we'll track all the joint data from a person, we will translate that onto all the joints of a robot, and we will build a perfect wireless marionette where you, Rob, can control this gigantic robot. It will do whatever you're doing, and then on top of that, we'll add in a layer where we could record your gesture and then recall it.
Interesting. So I was in Bilbao, Spain, and we were doing a conference, and I can't remember the name of the dance troupe, but there's a guy who's doing a very similar thing with drones, and like flying drones. And what they've done is they take spatial data, motion tracking a human dancer, and then they mimic that with drones, where each drone serves as a joint, right?
Yep.
And as you move, these drones mirror your movement. It's very trippy.
Oh, that's wild.
It's super cool. I like that though. It's it's like the examination of the place where humans and robotics meet.
Yeah.
Exploring the interaction.
Absolutely. We had our big plan. We were so bold. We're like, this will be easy.
You have to though, right?
Yeah.
You have to have big ideas, and you have to just rush into them, and then
believe that it's simple.
Figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
And that's how progress is made. So
when we, we're you'd be sitting around and passing a spliff and drinking bourbon and dreaming big and what could it be? And our idea was, we'd done a bunch of the classes that I was in were all focused on computational forms. How do you understand patterns? How do you derive new forms from existing patterns? I think if I was in the same set of courses now, we'd instead be focusing on machine learning and artificial intelligence.
That is the thing.
Right. That's the it thing right now.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was Markov chains and predictive behaviors and essentially clusters of robust statistics that would help you make predictive choices.
Right.
Which is, machine learning is that on...
Well, it's the next iteration. It's
right,
that
exactly.
plus.
That plus accelerated structures.
Right.
So our idea was, let's capture a library of movements. So let's, the same way that you teach a dancer to move, let's catalog a whole subset of training activities so that we know the different types of movements that a person might make. And then how could we, on the fly, assemble new patterns of movement and behavior and essentially teach this robot to dance only out of the assembled pieces.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, all right, robot. Here's a bunch of dance moves.
Dance for me. Baxter.
So did you...
We never got to that iteration. We were very happy to have an iteration where we had a robotic form that could mimic the behavior of a person, where we could record it, play it back, and catalog it.
Yeah.
So that's Ars Robotica, and that first iteration was all focused on how do we do those pieces and then do it in real time.
Yeah.
And that was, it was a strangely gratifying activity to stand in front of this robot and all of a sudden it was mirroring everything you were doing.
That's a little creepy, right?
Oh, it was super creepy.
Just like, whoa, man.
Like, okay, jeez. Bro, whatever you say, Baxter. That's cute. Fuck.
So did you use touch in that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and were you using touch to control the robot?
We didn't use touch to control the robot because we were a collaboration with this other engineering team. I was focused entirely on how do we capture that data, how do we have a representation of that the user can see, and then how do we pack that information in a way that we can send over to the engineer that was working exclusively with the robot.
Yeah.
And part of that was because the engineering student was focused on robotics applications and how to interop between different input and output tools.
Yeah.
So it was so funny, I love moments where you have an idea that you're pretty clear on how to chase it, and then you get derailed only to come back to your first idea. Mm-hmm. We started out, and I was telling this engineering student, I'm like, I think we should use open sound control as a format for sending this data. It's a defined format. There's libraries for it. Let's just do that.
Great protocol, man.
Yeah,
I love OSC.
Great. Let's use OSC.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, you don't want to do that.
That's for musician.
Right. That's not an engineering solution. Yeah. Okay, fine. So then we spent, I don't know, probably like the next 4 hours, all dancing around how do we set up a consistent UDP packet structure to send this information in a regularized time sequence fashion. We chase our tails on this, and I was finally like, I literally think we're just defining the same spec that's in OSC. Will you please just read through the documentation? And this just poor engineer grumbles at me. It's like, oh yeah, no, we do want this.
Yeah.
It's like, you're fucking kidding me, man. Come
dude,
on.
this exists. Let's
not
the wheel.
Reinvent this. This is this isn't any fun right now. We're going so slow.
Yeah. I know a guy, is a Frenchman. He writes this cool software called Châtain, and the whole thing, it's basically control protocol manipulation. It's a way to timeline, to manipulate, to add math functions to. It's like Touch Designer-esque, but it's only for control protocol, and it's all based around OSC. Everything comes back to OSC. It works with DMX and ArtNet and serial ACN, streaming ACN, and MIDI, but it all comes back to OSC.
It's a rock solid framework. Defined format.
I don't know why it's not used more prolifically. It's higher resolution than anything else. It is native Ethernet, native over the network. It makes a lot of sense.
Easy use. I feel like I'm seeing it more and more. What's interesting, I remember this is the conversations that you have with lighting designers, especially hardcore theatrical lighting designers. I remember one of my instructors looking at the landscape of media servers and tools and technologies, and they would shake their head at me and be like, your industry is where lighting was 50 years ago. You just wait. Like at some point,
Wait, what?
this will stabilize. You'll have consistent formats.
Oh,
Things
I
will level out.
Yeah, I understand.
You can agree on standards.
Right.
Because it's the wild, like, video still feels like it's the Wild West.
It is the Wild West. It's totally the Wild West. But that's we're on the tail end of convergence, right? That's what they called that phenomena when lighting and video met and kind of like had a baby. And that's where like media servers are, right?
Yep.
That's where, when all of a sudden all lighting fixtures became pixels. And you had one group these two groups, right? You had your video guys and your lighting guys. They had to figure out how to like create a single thing.
Yeah.
And it was a huge deal, man. Like I was going to LDI at that time too, and it was just like this huge phenomena. Disruption to the industry.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, I don't know, that space is so weird right now. The screen density is accelerating so quickly. I don't know how we keep up is really complicated.
Yeah. And well, so screen density, that's an interesting topic because I almost feel like it's different, but it's similar to the race for the louder speaker or the brighter light or the higher res screen. It's like with screen resolution, you need to keep up in terms of video pipeline to data pipeline to drive that data to those pixels. But it's still at a certain point, it's like, well, what's the point? There's a point until there's no point.
Yeah, there's like so many fights. I did a job with the same collaborator, Dan, in a rock quarry in Connecticut. And, of all places. Same rock quarry the granite for the base of the Statue of Liberty came out of. Rad story. Anyway.
Piece of history. Right
there you go. Right. Take a piece of quarry home with you. To work in the quarry, you had to be certified as a miner. We had to do this like day-long miner training.
What?
And it was, the things that you do as a video artist. Sometimes you're like, did I do that?
Yeah, okay. I'm heavy equipment certified.
Right.
All this random shit. I'm like, I can do rope access. I had to take a rope access course.
All right. Exactly. There it is. So we're in this rock quarry. We've got 3 channels of projection on the quarry wall that are making up our canvas. And I think the projectors they were 2Ks. And so we're looking at it one night, and the audience was like, they were positioned about 150 feet away from the surface. And we're looking at it at native resolution, and we're sweating bullets because we've got a tight deadline. I think we had like 2 weeks before the show opened. We had tried to do a bunch of media work before we got to the site, but we had never aligned on what the content and form was like. So we were stressed the fuck out. We're like, how are we going to make this work? We don't know what the content's going to be. We don't know how we're going to sequence it.
Really? Wait, you didn't have your content set and you were going into the gig?
We were 2 weeks away from opening.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so we still had 2 weeks to finish.
Right.
And we were working with this experimental group that was really into this organic emergence of the artwork. Dan and I had both been like, we have video to shoot and edit. We need to like have an idea.
Yeah. It could be improv up until a certain point.
Right, but we need to bring materials, man. Like, help us out.
Yeah.
And so we'd finally set up all the projection. We were blended. We had one big unified canvas. We were getting ready to dive into what we were going to shoot, edit, and end up putting in the show. And confronting the fact that the resolution of it, we just didn't have enough computers that could render fast enough to get us where we needed to be.
So was your pipeline, was it all coming out of a single machine, or were you doing like a network span across computers?
We're only doing one machine. We had one media server driving the 3 projectors and then our control surface.
Yeah.
But we were still, not quite 6K across. And I was sitting next to Dan, and I was like, okay. We played the same game you play at the eye doctor, right? It's like, okay, A or B? A or B?
Yeah.
B or C? B or C? B or C or A. And what I was doing without him looking was I was turning down the resolution first by a half, then by then a quarter, and then an eighth.
Right.
And it wasn't until, from the perspective of where the audience was to the surface, it wasn't until we were at that barrier between a quarter of the resolution and an eighth of the resolution
that he could even tell.
That he could tell.
Wow, that's a great test. And in the end, man, that is people get really caught up in like spec. You know, people are so obsessed with like, okay, 4K, 8K. It's like, well, let's figure out what is necessary to achieve the effect that we're going for.
Exactly.
And then, you know, it's like maybe you don't need a $15,000 CPU, computer to run this thing. Maybe you can do it on something much less powerful, or maybe you can do something 3 times complex with less resolution.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, ultimately that's where we landed. We were like, okay. Like once we had that like eyeball test, we're like, great. Like we don't need anywhere near the resolution that we thought that we needed.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden there are a ton of doors that are open that we can explore and chase that we never would have thought.
What was what was the effect? Like what was the content? Rock Quarry is a really cool venue, man.
The Rock Quarry was wild. The piece was pitched as a sound poem about the history of the Earth, the geologic history of the Earth.
Oh, perfect.
So it was all geologic formation. There was volcanoes and colliding continents, and there was an ice age, and there was the emergence of man and an industrial age.
It was a dance performance?
It was... I don't know what you call it. It was like a sound, video, lighting extravaganza.
Experimental.
It was very experimental. Because it was all projection, but there were zip lines that ran across the quarry. So there were performers that were on the zip lines.
Wow.
There were dancers that were on the ground. There was all sorts of lighting that was embedded all around the rock quarry. Mm-hmm. And then there was all manner of bass and sound that was installed.
So you said this was in New Hampshire?
This is in Connecticut.
In Connecticut. Was this part of your ASU experience or your Keene experience?
Part of my ASU experience. It was in a summer where, like you do, all of a sudden there are like 13 gigs that are lined up all in a row. And you're like, how are you going to make this work?
Right.
Because Dan and I, before that, Dan... had his thesis project. We did a show called Wonder Dome.
Yeah.
Wonder Dome closed, and then we went to Mexico, and we did an installation for a projection festival, and then that wrapped, and we went to Connecticut to do the show in the Rock Quarry, and then I went home for a hot second, and then got called out to help assist on a job at Comic-Con. And then I went back, and then Derivative called me and asked me to go out and hang out with them for a week to like get a better sense of what their place was like. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the summer was over, and I was like, what has just happened in my life?
Hang out. So at that point, were you already doing your tutorial series?
I was. I had, God bless Daryl Hux, one of my advisors and close friends when I was living in New Hampshire, had made me promise that when I went to grad school that I would write about what I was doing. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't care what you do, but you have to document your work. Just document your work.
Yeah.
And at that point...
That's wise, man. That's wisdom right there.
It's like the smartest advice you can give anybody is just document your work.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't even have to be phenomenal. Just like have some record of what you've done.
When you think about like all the amazing things, the diversity of what humans have done over the eons, and the only thing that carries on or carries any weight are the things that get documented.
You gotta write it down.
Gotta document it or it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so I promised Daryl that I would do that. And so a big chunk of my tutorial and writing series largely came out of the fact that I was just trying to keep up with what I was doing. And at that point, that was before Elber's book. It was before there were any really big series about touch on the web. And so I was like, no one's writing about this. I can write about this. And, whatever. I'm not afraid. I'll learn in public.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, man. And it also gives people an insight into your thought process. I watched one of your videos. It's very. I understand why it became so popular. You know, you're easy to listen to. Your voice is like mildly hypnotic. I was like watching, like, wow, this is so fascinating.
This chop top, that.
Yeah.
Daddy, that chop top, top comp.
It's you're a great teacher, and it's arguably that's kind of where that tutorial series is what allowed you to you became famous from that in certain circles.
Internet, like my internet famous is that little slice of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's why Obscura found you and snapped you up. They're like, yeah, who's this guy doing the tutorial series? Let's get him. He's obviously
he knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
yeah. It's like, and it's been strange because it's been bridges to lots of different people. And now I feel like I don't do nearly as many tutorials as I wish that I could. I do try to write more because what I found is that more and more these days I want something that's written that I can skim quickly or stop and come back to.
Yeah.
Videos are sometimes harder to try and find your way through.
They are. If you're trying to use a video as a learning resource, it's more engaging. You can really it's more engaging. However, it is harder in some regards to find specific information, quickly.
Yeah. It's hard to search it, right?
It is hard to search it.
And there was a minute where I was like, oh, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a video and then I'll write a transcript of it and then I'll do screenshots. And I was like, if this was my full-time job and that was all I did, then yes, sure, I could do that. But there are not enough hours in the day.
I'm a strong believer of different phases of your life are for different things, and you did that, and that was like a bridge to where you are now. And, it's like, if you come back to it, if you feel compelled to do it, then do it, but if you don't, if there's other things that, don't get stuck in one place. Just,
exactly.
Yeah. Those tutorials are going to live on in perpetuity. They're there, man. It's on the internet.
Yeah, it's on the internet.
It's like a diamond. It's forever.
There it goes. Yeah. I do want to go back at some point and do an updated series. Because I realize, it's so funny to watch some of those things. I'm like, oh, that's a terrible way to do that. Oh, God, no, don't do that.
Past Matt, what the fuck were you thinking?
What were you doing? Which is ironic. Any project that you open after you developed some domain expertise has that moment, right? Mm-hmm. Where you look back at it and you're like, what was I thinking? Who was that person that made this disorganized mess of a thing?
Yeah.
And in many respects, I think that's actually really important to have moments where you can look back and go, oh, yeah, all of us have that kind of arc. It's easy to forget what it is to be a beginner when you're only focused on where you are in the present.
Well, that's a really interesting way to document your arc, right? And for you as a it's almost like journaling.
Yeah,
right? Where you're
100%.
Oh, right, that's what I was thinking. That's where my skill set was at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The needle has moved. That's cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Man, I'm sure now it's because you're still right now at Obscura. You're developing. You're touch developer. That's what you do.
So my role's changed. It's actually been really interesting. When we were acquired by Madison Square Garden, I moved from being a developer to being associate director of software. And since then, I've moved into a director position.
Yeah.
So I still do some direct touch development these days, but largely I'm focused on strategy, direction, and trajectory for some of the bigger pieces that we were working on around MSG Sphere. So that's been a huge, crazy transition and maneuver to understand what it is to go from being down in the thick of it to having a higher level perspective on how you're laying out some work and what's going to happen.
Yeah. I want to rewind for a second. And just for people who don't know, Obscura is has been one of the forerunners of projection mapping. They're a company that has pushed the boundaries. They brought projection mapping continually to the next level multiple times. And you got plucked out of ASU to work for Obscura, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And they were just like, their system, their projection mapping system was done in Touch Designer. Mm-hmm. So they've been, and how old are they? 15?
Let's see here. When I joined Obscura in 2015, that was Obscura's 15th birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they would be 19 now. I guess about the time of our acquisition, they were 17 years old as a company.
And they were like, for me, they were always an example of how this model could work. You know what I mean? They were like, it's like, oh yeah, you can make a business doing these kind of like new media art installations. Obscura's doing it. So anytime I had doubts, I was like, no, just keep on going, because if Obscura can do it, you can do it. It's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's what Obscura was to a lot of people. I think that's still what Obscura is to many of us that are still there, is that it was this North Star on the pirate seas of like the place that you could aim yourself towards.
Yeah, the pirate seas of the new media art scene.
Yeah, exactly. Second star on the right, straight on till morning. You can get there.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. There's not a lot of examples. Well, now there's more. There's much more now. But it's definitely not been an easy field to make a living.
It's a weird space. And I think it's an especially weird space because it's phenomenally expensive. All of it is expensive.
Yeah.
There is no part of it that's cheap. And you can cut corners, but you're often so sorry for it.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I think that there hasn't been a whole lot of demand for really high budget new media art pieces, because it's brand new as a field. There are not a lot of examples of how you can use it in a corporate space in a way that makes sense to the dollar counters, the penny pinchers. Exactly. And it's just a brand new field.
Well, it's interesting. I think one of Obscura's really, one of their flags that they planted pretty firmly was that they were largely in a position where they steered clients away from any kind of purposeful, or I don't want to use the word ugly, but branding that was branding for the sake of branding.
Yeah.
We tried really hard not to be a company that did projection that was about brand identity.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's easy to make a billboard. It's hard to make a piece of beautiful art that is... I mean, in the end, all of this stuff it's corporate branding, right? It's like, of course, it is a way to set yourself apart as an entity, right? All of these things, whether it's the Taj Mahal, right? Yep. Or whether it's the Sydney Opera House. These are pieces that differentiate your clients from their competitors.
Exactly. But we spent a lot of time really being thoughtful about how can we, let's include your brand colors, or let's include a subtle nod to your logo or some of the aesthetics that you have inside of your identity. Let's find subtle ways of reinforcing your identity without being totally garish or blatant in your face.
Yeah, man. Exactly. And that's the mark of a true artist, when you can be subtle with your art and still make a huge splash. And that's like that's smart marketing, it's
because then half of the allure is someone walks away and they're like, wait, who did that? Who was that for? Oh, exactly. Oh my god, I need to know. Right. I need to search for this. Right. You generate as much enthusiasm and excitement by being a little mysterious as you do by being obvious.
Obscura is a master of that. So Travis Dreckel, when I met him, right, I was just like, I was like, this is a cool guy. And like the whole identity of Obscura is like a bunch of cool people. that's like what they're,
it's a
that's
pirate
their
ship.
job.
Yeah.
It's a pirate ship, but it's full of like Jack Sparrow cool fucking pirates, man.
Who are you? Oh my god, you're doing what?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Jesus.
And it's worked really well, and it's been amazing to watch that like progress. It's been like, oh yeah, like I said, it's like we have taken that and we have used that as our North Star in order to take our area of expertise, which is LED and lighting within architecture. We're like, no, we have to keep it artistic. We got to keep it stylized. We've got to, make sure that these are art pieces first and, corporate branding second or whatever.
Well, and that's right. That's also a vision of a world that doesn't quite yield to corporate masters.
Yeah.
And that's, we are, this is a terrible analogy, but I think it is strangely appropriate, is that if you rewind, many years, and you think about how we achieved the absurd pieces of architecture in places like Italy and France that are largely funded by and operated by the church. Mm-hmm. Right? There was monarchies and religion that bankrolled these pieces and got to decide what it was to make big pieces of public art in the form of architecture and sculpture. And the new media space is similarly positioned, only our masters happen to be corporate entities.
Well, there's always patrons.
Yeah.
There's always patrons. We have Digital Ambience has grown through a series of patrons of the arts, and they're people who are just like, oh yeah, that's nifty, and like they have the means, and they're like, yeah, do something cool. And it's very similar. I feel like the arts in this time period, right? They're very much. It's a similar model to like when Da Vinci or Michelangelo was they were doing their work. They were funded by patrons, and it's like we all know those artists. We don't know who their patrons were, but there were patrons, and they were like, yeah, paint this chapel, create these works of art, and here's the money to do it. You don't have to worry about feeding yourself. Just do what you do. And I feel like that's a very similar.
Mm-hmm. P.S. Please include God.
Yes.
P.S. Should be white. Should be a white dude. That would be preferable.
Can you just brand this with God?
Come on. Just God branded.
Yeah.
Great. I love it. All white folk. Yes. Excellent. Right. Check. There you go.
I mean, there's always. There are always, and I feel like that's part of the creativity, right? Is like taking those boundaries and playing with them.
Right. How do you push on that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Where do you subvert that?
Right. That's part of being an artist, is like, because we all have, it's almost, it's counterproductive to have no boundaries.
Right.
It's not like I do the best work when I'm trying to think creatively within a set of boundaries, whether those are technical or financial or like theological or like, yeah.
You need lines.
You do need lines.
Blank pages are much harder to illustrate than pages that have some form of constraint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you get to take creative advantage of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Obscura happened. Working for Obscura, you kind of went with them through their merger, and then was it MSG, Madison Square Garden?
Madison Square Garden Company
purchased Obscura.
Correct.
In 17 or 18?
I think technically it was 17. I think it was November of 17.
Yeah.
Because it's been about a year and a half now, I think, of that transition.
And it's been a dramatic transition. It seems like for you and for, I know like Jojo was he was like their.
He was in systems.
Yeah, systems engineering.
One of the systems engineers.
Yeah, he's cool, man. I like him a lot.
He's a wild human.
He's a wild human. But I've known him for a long, long time. I knew him when he was at Elemental LED, way back in the day. But yeah, people are spinning off and they're going off doing their own thing, and
yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of any It's such a curious experience. I feel like out of this, I have found more people that have been through similar either purchases, acquisitions, mergers, all different flavors of what that looks like. And it's curious to hear similar stories about tumultuous integrations, how cultures have, where folks have planted or drawn lines, what alliances get made, how that shakes out and levels out over time. And I think we're close to the settling of some of the most destabilizing pieces. And we'll see what that means kind of moving forward.
So MSG is over in New York. You guys are here in San Francisco. Did that merger, is there a lot of MSG influence?
Well, Madison Square Garden is interesting because it's, as an organization, most often it's associated with the garden proper, but it's actually a entertainment company that has a number of properties both in the sports scene as well as in the venue scene. So the Coliseum, Radio City Music Hall, Madison Square Garden, a handful of other locations, and then the Knicks, I don't know any of the teams, shame on me. I've been a bad acquired person. But there's a handful of sports teams and there's a handful of properties. And so as a umbrella company, it's really in this largely venue management, entertainment management kind of space.
Yeah.
And so I think the hardest reconciliation is the culture and spirit of a small, agile studio that's focused almost exclusively on boundary breaking and ideological challenging activities, and how that fits into a larger organization that is about stability, consistency, and reliable execution.
Not to mention, New York is a very traditional business environment. I noticed that time and time again where, you go to New York, you hang out with people, and even studios in New York, they're very, it's like tight-laced. I don't know how to explain it. It's a very conservative culture.
Suits, ties.
Yeah, exactly.
Tight polished shoes. That's right.
Exactly.
It is culturally, it's very different. I think that has been the hardest part of our integration, is figuring out how and where the spirit of Obscura fits into this crazy, big identity that is Madison Square Garden Company.
And have they been, have they made their culture, have they been applying their culture or trying to apply their culture to Obscura, or have they left you guys kind of to do your own thing? Has it been heavy-handed or has it been hands-off,
I don't know the right way to categorize it. I think at times it's felt like, what's a good I'm trying to think of a good analogy or a good parable for it. It's almost like ships passing in the night, right? It's almost like we've done all the right things in the wrong phase. We're out of phase with one another in how we're trying to line up and synchronize our efforts.
Yeah.
And so it's, too much effort, either too late or too soon. And I think that's happened on both sides of this equation as we've tried to understand who we are in this transition and how we reorganize ourselves, as well as how that lines up with the needs and focuses of this much larger entity.
And so the main mission of Obscura with Madison Square Garden is the Dome, right?
Yeah.
You guys are. It's for people who don't know. It's a massive venue, and it is a huge immersive dome. Like, it's a stadium-sized dome.
MSG Sphere, there's 2 locations. There's one in Las Vegas and one in London. And both are 16 to 18,000 seats for the venue. It's, I don't know, it's a silly acreage of media playing. It's gargantuan.
So it's a huge dome that's completely seamlessly covered in projection, which creates an environment where you can stick like 10,000 people, whatever it is, thousands of people into this environment and play immersive content and have immersive
experiences.
Yeah, experiential shows. It's a really cool idea.
It's a preposterous undertaking. What a gamble. Holy cow. It's one of those... It's an interesting endeavor in that it is, even for a person that understands this industry, it is simultaneously terrifying. Like, how could this work? And exciting because it does really challenge our notions of what's immersion, how big is too big, how do we navigate and negotiate a performance inside of a media space that's that big? What will it mean to create a venue that's that enormous, and how will we build relationships both with fellow audience members and with performers? What will that even look like?
So what's the resolution of this thing? Like, what are we talking? What's the tile? Like, what's the tile space? Or
let's see here. I don't know if there's officially a...
If you can't talk about it, that's fine too.
I'm trying to... I don't know if there's a resolution that I can talk about yet for the interior space.
Right.
What I could say is that it's large enough that a single frame of footage, uncompressed, is close to a gigabyte.
Holy shit.
So it really is like a petabyte style format in terms of when you start to think about...
That is insane.
Terrifying. How will we do it? How will we shoot it? How will we edit it? How will we sequence it? How will we deliver it and master it? Oh my god. Oh no. But at the same time, right, that's also right at the cusp of what we're trying to understand in this hungry media space.
Yeah.
Because it's
pushing the boundaries, man. That's a great technical challenge.
Right. How are you going to do it? Good luck.
Talk about an engineering challenge. It's like, all right, figure this out. And here's all the resources you need to do it. Now just figure out how it's possible.
Exactly. Riddle me this.
I like those challenges, though, man. That's why I feel like the cream of our industry end up at the borders of those technical challenges. That's like pushing the envelope in our little slice of knowledge, right? We're pushing that envelope out. It's very cool. That's a really cool challenge.
It's a wild one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeehaw. Oh my goodness.
So you're basically working on the system to drive that.
Yes, that's a large part of what we're focused on, is how on earth do you orchestrate all the pieces that work in there? How do you program that? What's the pipeline for getting content in? When you start to think about a content program on a media space that's that large, what does that mean for third parties? How on earth do you do a concert in there? How do you do a conference in there? How do you make sure that a client that's coming to this space doesn't need 2 years of lead time to be able to render what they're going to make for it? What does a render pipeline for that kind of surface even mean or look like?
Can you play PowerPoint?
Don't worry, you can play your keynote.
Can you do your PowerPoints?
So it's, there's a huge number of opportunities to explore, which I think is probably one of the pieces that's most inspiring and exciting about it. There's also huge challenges about if you think about what this means for this media space, what happens when it gets bigger? I mean, my joke at Obscura was always, anytime Travis had an idea about projectors, internally, I would always add one more zero to whatever number he told me.
Yeah.
Because that's the system that you had to design.
Right.
If you wanted to do 20 channels, we have to design something for 200 channels. Because by the time this job is over, the next job is going to be at least double.
Right.
If not triple the projector count.
So one of the great parts about the system that you guys use at Obscura, though, is it's a scalable framework, right? It's a scalable system where you can add more computers and theoretically indefinitely, right?
Yeah, we the last really big job that I worked on, MGM Cotai, we had this great challenge. So there's it's this big interior atrium space in a casino in Macau, and we wanted media to be able to flow seamlessly from one LED surface to the next and respect the physical space that was between the screens. So I wanted the screens to behave as if they were cutouts into a virtual world that was hidden behind the real world.
Yeah.
So if you unwrapped the screens and took into account all of the extra architecture that was in the way, what's that UV unwrap look like? Mm-hmm. Well, that looked like 64,000 lateral pixels.
Right.
Awesome. Cool. Oh, jeez. Perfect. And like 30 and change vertical.
Yeah.
So we spent a big chunk of our effort understanding how we could distribute the rendering for that across as many machines as we wanted. And we landed on an approach that would mean that the same mechanism would work for five displays, could work for 100 displays, could work for 1,000 displays. We could scale as high and as far as the network bandwidth would allow us to stream the information between them.
Yeah.
And so that's where it got really interesting and exciting, was that all of a sudden the notion that there were boundaries around how big you could make something disappeared.
See, so that is where I really love that paradigm, because I'm very focused on architecture. So taking a model of a piece of architecture, right, 3D model, and then adding displays of many different types, whether that's pixels and LEDs, or whether that's screens, and using those screens as virtual windows within your 3D model, and then generating 3D content to play back over those surfaces. It's volumetric. Mm-hmm. It's such a cool way to think about playing back content in a space. It's not about a two-dimensional video. It's about three-dimensional effects that are rendering through your displays.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's that intersection of, it's the blurring of what's the physical world, what's the virtual world.
Yes.
How do we seamlessly transition and navigate between those?
Yes.
And that to me is like, I think that's where we're going to go. That's the interesting future is.
Well, there's only a few systems that will do that, right? And Touch Designer, I've seen a number of systems developed in Touch Designer that treat content that way. We use a system out of France called Smode. It's like Notch, mm-hmm. right? It's a 3D environment. It's like Cinema 4D or 3D Studio Max with the ability to pixel map, mm-hmm. or it's a very, very cool system, and I think that's the future of D3. Kind of does it, but with D3 you can't create truly volumetric content. It's still stuck in the two-dimensional paradigm where you create flat surfaces, you display your flat content on the flat display surfaces, and for us, we're not playing videos, we're doing like volumetric pixel mapping, which is very low resolution, but those pixels it's like a point cloud mm-hmm. in 3D space. So it's not about a video, it's about create a particle effect that flows through
it's about a world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's becoming more and more like a game engine.
Yeah.
So you gotta take your game engine, create your like 3D tornado particle effect, and run that through your point cloud of pixels.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Rad. That's what I want. That.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, I think, it opens up a number of different interesting questions and challenges, because if we understand how to do it in 3 dimensions, then we can explore ideas about how does time intersect with this.
Yeah.
Right? What does it mean when you can capture what's happened in a space over time, replay it back through that virtual environment, and you have a historical map of events, happenings. You have a whole different way of capturing the world, just sharing information.
Yeah, well, the whole 3D camera thing, right? I think that's changing the way that's an essential component to how we create content for these environments, because these environments are intrinsically 3-dimensional, right? It's 3-dimensional, and then a video played over that becomes 4-dimensional, right? So it's like you've got your you need a 3-dimensional camera in order to create content for these environments.
Yeah, it's the world is a weird place. I like saying that the future is weird. It's weirder than you expect it to be.
Yeah,
because it'll only get stranger. For sure, it'll get stranger.
Yeah. So do you see your work going into that direction? Are you excited about pushing things forward?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm really curious and excited about intersections of traditional forms, new forms, and I really love where we're going with aware spaces.
With the what?
Aware spaces that are cognizant of you, responsive to you. I think that's going to be, how we integrate with the Internet of Things and what the world knows about us, what we know about the world, and how we move through that. I think will be really interesting.
Yeah, man. I'm working on a project right now where we're integrating the BMS, the building management system, into our system. We just got access to that data. It's like, all right, great. Now we know what rooms are occupied at what time, so we can play with that. Right? And even simple sensors.
Oh, yeah.
You can do a lot with that. So it's just tying in or grabbing data from the building management system allows you to create really cool effects with architectural installations that span across multiple rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's right. It's a strange thing to want a world that feels like it's living with you, but I think that's right. Part of the human desire, part of what we miss, is that our connection to nature, to living things that we're a part of. And I think in a lot of ways we're pushing our technology and its integration in our lives to be mirrors and mimics of some of those pieces that we're missing.